Com vocês, Ryan Nadeau.
So we'll just wait a second while the presentation loads up here. I typically don't do slideshows, and this is my first time putting one together. It's usually the Ryan show up here, but this is a little bit longer than I typically do, so I need some slides to fall back on. Hugo, can we get the slides on the screen? How's everyone doing today? Good. Perfect. So I'm here to talk about specifically Silicon Valley, the state of mind that exists in Silicon Valley that's being exported around the world right now, how different countries are trying to adopt it, the different ways of doing so, and more importantly, Brazil's role in that ecosystem, and how large corporates are looking at Brazil as their target market for where to go next, right? So we'll start a little bit with my story. Who the hell am I? So my name is Ryan Nadeau. I'm a Director of Special Projects over at a company called GALVANIZE. I'm also the International Curator here with Flora. And Flora and I met 7 years ago in San Francisco via a friend who lives in Rio. And she had come to San Francisco several times, and we used to party like crazy together, the most fun, and that's when I realized I absolutely had to come to Brazil because no one parties like Brazilians. And one day she messaged me, she goes, Ryan, she's like, we need to talk about work, we need to talk, let's get serious for a minute. I'm like, oh, Flora, you know, let's just go out and have fun. And she goes, no, sit down and listen to me. I've been quite inspired by a lot of the things I've seen you working on in Silicon Valley, and I really want to bring that to Brazil. Can you help me? And I was like, yeah, well, absolutely. Let's do this. And that was 2 years ago. And fast forward to today, it's been an amazing experience, and super excited to be here with all of you to really talk about how we can advance the Brazilian ecosystem in the right way relative to what's happening in the global economy. So a little bit about my story. Because Flora thought it would be super important to talk about where we all came from. So this is me on the left. Actually, this picture was sent to me about 2 weeks ago, and it kind of describes my life quite well. I've always been, I started out as a pumpkin, I like to say. Very awkward, very shy, and not really connected to anything global at all. So I actually grew up in a small town in Texas. A town of about maybe 200, 300 people. If you're thinking Texas, think George Bush country, right? Not a very innovative place. The closest neighbors I had were about 20 horses and about 50 cows. So I didn't really have a global mindset. But I wasn't born in Texas. I was actually born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And Texas was sort of a place I felt stuck in, right? When I first moved there, I actually lived in the inner city, where it wasn't very diverse, but it wasn't very diverse in the opposite direction in terms of me being the only white kid in school. So I was hyper nerdy because I couldn't be the cool kid. And then when we moved to the country after my parents got divorced, I remember this is a school, again, 200, 300 people in this entire town. I think there was zero diversity. Everyone was white. I remember getting to the front office in the morning, hearing a bunch of people talking about the cute new kid, and I'm thinking, I'm like looking around like, who's the cute new kid, right? And then realized they were talking about me, and that's when my academics started to go downhill, and I realized the importance of playing politics and becoming a little bit social. Oh. How do I go back? So I grew up in Texas, but as soon as I was 18, I got the hell out, right? I always defined myself in opposition to the entire Texas mindset. It's very closed-minded. It's very insular. It doesn't get you anywhere outside of Texas. So Boston and Massachusetts, where my grandparents lived, was always my escape, and my dream was always to go back to Boston as soon as I could. I thought I was going to live there forever. Fast forward, I did end up going back to school in Boston, to Boston University, where I learned something completely new about myself, which was I wanted to see the world beyond just Boston. And I was very lucky to attend Boston University, where it's an incredible international school, one of the most international schools in the country. And not only that, it also happens to be one of the most expensive schools in the country, about $45,000 a semester, which I'm still paying off. But what that allowed me to do is really gain the most incredible network of international students, but not just international students that come from very elite backgrounds. We're talking prime ministers' kids. We're talking about the kids of the big conglomerates. And that really exposed me to a side of the world that I would have never had the opportunity to see should I have stayed in Texas. And I decided to go explore it, first taking a trip around the world on a boat, which was kind of crazy, stopping in about 13 countries along the way, and I got hooked. Right, the globe became my playground, and it actually led me to Pakistan, where I fell in love with a Pakistani girl whose family happened to run the country, and it became sort of my launch pad into technology, strange enough. I ended up in San Francisco via Pakistan. It's not the usual trajectory, I promise. But what happened is I'd become sort of a mini celebrity in Islamabad, and there are a couple. Pakistan has an incredible amount of technical expertise, and there's one particular company called Convo, which was their top startup at the time, and they were looking to expand into the United States. And they were like, okay, we're looking for someone. You look like you know what's happening in the U.S. Are you interested in joining our startup? And I was like, well, what the hell's a startup? Right? I was a nonprofit guy. I was building schools. I was not at all interested in the for-profit sector. So I was given Mark Benioff's book and a couple other ones, and really just kind of given a crash course in startups. And this is like my first real job. And at this point, I'm dating a billionaire's daughter who's more worried about her Chanel and Birkin bags than anything else. So I realized I had to make money, and maybe this startup way was a way to do it. Mark Benioff did it, right? So I ended up moving to San Francisco, and it was kind of a funny story there too, because the company was like, okay, Ryan, we want to set up an office in New York, in Boston, or San Francisco. It's like, okay, I lived in Boston 6 years. I've partied in New York. I've never been to San Francisco. I don't think I'll like it. When all my friends told me that you would love it, told me that I would love it, and I was like, I'm just going to use this as a way to get a free holiday and go check out the city. And I remember getting out of the BART station. How many people have been to San Francisco? Okay. So I got out of the BART station in the middle of the city, and if you've been in the BART station in the middle of the city, you realize that it smells like poo, it looks like you're in a third world country, and I fell in love immediately, and I've been there ever since. And San Francisco was really sort of my launch into the innovation sphere. I fell in love. I became hooked. I joined a company after leading the startup for several years, raising a $8 million Series A, getting TechCrunch as one of our first big customers, who at that time ran their newsroom off that product. It really launched me into a completely different sphere that I never expected to be a part of. And I was at that company for about 4 or 5 years, and then I decided to join a company called GALVANIZE, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But that really became a platform, right? So at GALVANIZE, we're an education company teaching individuals how to code, about data science and getting jobs in the field, as well as doing large-scale digital transformation at Fortune 2000 companies. But I became sort of the ambassador, right? Their director of special projects and all of the other dope shit. They kind of realized, okay, Ryan, you're gonna bring us the most interesting people. You do what you want. And as long as you bring value, it's going to be good at the end of the day. So I really just kind of made it up all as it went along. And I'll show several pictures. I started this whole thing called fist bump diplomacy. And I would always wear a pair of pleather pants when I would walk around and meet high-up individuals, and I would make them call me El Pleather. So you look over here, you've got the Secretary of Defense on the left. On the right, it's the Ambassador to Colombia. Next slide. On the left, Secretary of Commerce. On the right, Mayor of Shanghai. On the left, Party Secretary Xie, one of the most powerful men in China. I became sort of a hit in China as well. It was a really interesting, brief stint. But I realized that I had a particular brand that Silicon Valley had imparted on me that was super, super, super valuable around the world. People wanted to learn about my particular style because I was representative of what they imagined Silicon Valley to be. Like, who can be this crazy white dude coming into the office with some of the most powerful men in the country wearing pleather pants and then being taken seriously at the same time? I remember the mayor of Shanghai coming up to me after giving a keynote across in one of the biggest events about 4 years ago in the city, saying, okay, all these other guys I don't care about. He goes, you are the future. You are the one. You're the type of person everyone here in China wants to be. How do we make this happen? So it's been a pretty fascinating journey. And it really taught me a lot about the global innovation ecosystem, but more importantly, how people are trying to replicate what we've built. What we built, it was built before I was ever there in Silicon Valley. You know, the Chinese think about it as an infrastructure play. They're building tech parks the size of San Francisco, thinking if you build it, they will come. The Japanese are trying to import it through corporate innovation, right? There's what people really don't understand, and you heard it earlier, is that Silicon Valley, it's not a place, it's a state of mind. And it just so happens to be the place where people with that state of mind had originally gathered. But that's spreading, that's changing, it's diversifying. And around the world, people are learning how to adapt this mindset to the local environment and the local ecosystems to make it their own. And that requires some cultural shifts as well. It's not a model that you can just import, right? You have to adapt to it. You have to make it your own. So real quick on GALVANIZE, because of course I have to make a shameless plug, but it's also very relevant to the technology ecosystem and what you really, some of the foundations that you need to have to build a healthy one. You know, we create a technology ecosystem for learners, entrepreneurs, startups, and established companies to meet the needs of the rapidly digitally changing world, right? What does that mean? We have 9 campuses across the United States where we have over 3,000 startups, 8,000 alumni that have graduated from our data science and our web development immersives, right? We're in the pipeline side of the equation because there's negative employment in tech, and if you don't have a healthy pipeline of individuals coming out of programs with the technical know-how to actually build the products that you need, the ecosystem's not going to get very far, right? And in places like Brazil, I mean, in San Francisco especially, like there are not enough engineers. So how could there be enough engineers in places like Brazil and other places around the world? So that's kind of the mission of GALVANIZE, right? And we're across the United States, as well as we have global presence and everywhere from China to Africa to Europe, where we actually don't just train people on the consumer side of the equation. We actually go in and we do large-scale digital transformations at some of the biggest companies in the world, right? So companies like Allstate Insurance, just a Fortune 200 company, had hired a bunch of our graduates, and they came to us and they said, okay, you know, we could hire all of your graduates. It's not actually going to solve the demand of the problem within our company. And we said, well, the solution's sitting within your own walls, right? It's just with individuals who've been working with your organizations for 5, 10 years, still coding in J8 and Jovial and using outdated programming methodologies. And these aren't people you necessarily want to get rid of. These are people that have an incredible amount of domain expertise and company knowledge that comes with being around for so long. So what's the best thing you can do for these individuals? It's to reskill them, make them relevant again for the modern day digital economy. And it really, it creates a much healthier internal corporate environment as well, because you're not just hiring a bunch of net new talent, you're actually looking at the existing resources you have, and you're giving them an opportunity to change the trajectory of their life, which will also change the trajectory of your organization. There's a video here, but I think I'll skip it and move a little bit forward, a little bit further. So I wanted to ask everyone here, tell me, or a couple people, and you can shout out, one-word answers. Tell me what comes to mind when you think of Silicon Valley, innovation, and more importantly, the importance of Brazil in this ecosystem. What does that mean for you? We'll maybe grab 3 or 4 people. You could yell out answers. Brilliant answer, absolutely. So we're talking about the importance of diversity and the diverse population in Brazil and what that represents when it comes to the solutions you can bring to the market, as well as the opportunity in Brazil, right? It's both it's also an opportunity, the income disparity here, right? There's a huge population that's underserved in the tech market, but that also has Brazil lagging behind other countries in Asia and Europe, for example. Absolutely, fantastic answer. Someone else?
I think Brazil is a huge market. We have more people here than England, France, and Germany together. And you can hire people, two things. The first one is the size of the market, and the second one is how much you will pay for your employees. Here you can hire a good back end for $1,000 per month, something like that. So I think these two things could be good for Silicon Valley in Brazil.
Absolutely, 100%. Let's get one more. One more. What does Brazil mean to you, thinking in the larger picture of the global innovation economy? What do you have here that no one else does? The what? The party side, that, show me that tonight, yeah? So a couple statistics, right, and some of this shouldn't be new to you. 209 million people, 138% mobile penetration, more phones than people, okay? That's crazy. 5th most populous country in the world, 3rd largest market for tech, so 3rd largest user of Facebook behind India and the United States. Top 2 and 3 for Twitter, YouTube, WhatsApp. 4th largest group of internet users. Before the recession, I think it was 25% of the population was self-employed. And the diversity I've seen in this country is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in the world, and I've been to over 70 countries. Okay, I kept talking to Flora about that when we go out to dinner. You know, it's the largest diaspora of Japanese outside of Japan, the largest diaspora of South Koreans, Lebanese. I mean, the list goes on. And that is such a huge strategic asset, right? It was just so crazy. We were going out to dinner and I'm watching someone walk over who I believe is, South Korean. I'm like, oh, another tourist. And then she just starts speaking her Portuguese. I'm like, holy shit. not a tourist. This is fucking awesome, right? And that's huge because Brazil represents the globe. And that's huge when it comes to developing products for the global market. Not only does it represent the globe, Brazil is the future. As long as the Trumps and these assholes don't keep winning and closing borders, the diversity around the world is only going to increase. It is going to look more and more and more like Brazil, like Sao Paulo, big cities, you know, over the next 20, 50 years. So in terms of that aspect, Brazil's ahead. And you need to capitalize on that, right? Because when you're talking about exporting Brazilian companies around the world in the future, that's one of your best strategic assets, right? You have this ability to adapt to so many different cultures because you represent such a wide variety. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But as you know, Brazil's also been a bit of a roller coaster ride. I think in September 2012, Forbes named Brazil one of the most innovative companies in the world, right? Fast forward to 2017, and BBC names Brazil one of the least innovative places on the planet. What the fuck happened? There's been some crises here, as I'm sure I don't have to explain to you. You know, and during this crisis, we saw 37% year-over-year decrease in investment, and VCs fled the market. Brazil's one of the places that everyone wanted a piece of, but too few were brave enough to touch when it came to investing capital after the recession. And as I don't need to lecture you on the problems Brazil faces with its bureaucratic tendencies, the laws, which are slowly starting to change from what I understand, the heavy tax burdens, high interest rates, the corruption, and the disconnect between the idea that innovation spurs economic development at the top levels makes Brazil 176 out of 190 of the easiest places in the world to start a business, according to the World Bank. However, Brazil will be back on its feet. It always does, because to put it bluntly, size matters. And Brazil has one of the most interesting markets in terms of size on the planet. And you're already seeing a number of different success stories, right? With everyone from Nubank to 99 Taxis to Dog Hero, which was one of my favorites to learn about because I call myself San Francisco's top dunkle. I'm the dog uncle. I'm the one that, I don't have a pet of my own, I have plants, but I watch everyone else's dogs while we're away. And you know, talking about the issues within the system, you know, there's these frustrations in the market, but where their frustrations are opportunities, where a lot of these companies came from, right? They capitalized on the frustrations that they encountered in the market. And that's where Brazilian entrepreneurs really shine. There are few markets as difficult as Brazil to start a company. And this forces people as a whole to be a whole different kind of scrappy to really get their businesses off the ground. You know, I can relate, you know, a bit in terms of being put inside of a specific model where you have to figure out ways around it, right? I'm dyslexic myself, so I think the statistic is 35% of all entrepreneurs are dyslexic because they're put into systems where you're forced to think and operate a certain way that you can't. I mean, you read differently, you learn differently, so you're forced to go around the system and learn the ins and the outs and figure out ways to make it work and make it happen while also not completely falling behind. And I think Brazilian entrepreneurs have that same opportunity, right? It's a difficult market, but if you can overcome that difficulty, you can make it pretty much anywhere. So yeah, back to the original, or what I said a second ago, size does matter in the case of Brazil. Every big company I talk to and I work with in the United States, Google, Amazon, you saw it with TechCrunch yesterday, Silicon Valley Bank, which Jackie will talk about, I'm sure, a little bit when she talks about her history. Every big company, when I talk to executives about what keeps them up at night, there are always a couple answers. China's usually number one, and Brazil's usually in the top 2 to 3. And Adecco is making that move as well. Adecco is the largest staffing company in the world, and They're planning to come here in the next year. Just to name a few, Brazil is one of the countries that keeps executives around the world up at night. Why? Because of the size of the market and the opportunities that are here. Okay, that's a fantastic opportunity for Brazilians, but it's also going to lead to challenges as you have other big corporations, multinationals around the world coming in and trying to take a piece of the pie, right? Which is why it's super, super important to incorporate the mindset of Silicon Valley, right? Which one of the most important parts of that mindset is a culture of learning, the growth mindset, to never, ever, ever stop, right? We're taught, we used to be taught that you are one thing, and when you become that one thing, you're that one thing forever. And that's changed, right? In our programs, in our data science programs, in our immersive programs, we've had mothers on food stamps who are saxophonists coming through our program, coming out, becoming IBM engineers, making $100,000 a year, right? We've had servers in restaurants come through our program, become data scientists. In this new digital economy, there is such a wide range of opportunities and really wonderful ways to capitalize on that in terms of the boot camps that are available, the online learning, the self-paced learning that you can go through to really enter into the market, right? And the same thing's happening with large corporates. Large corporates is, Alexandre here? Is Alex here? Oh, hey buddy. So I actually wanted to call you out at the beginning. Can you stand up for a second? So for everyone, I'm gonna butcher the name. So it's Alex, works for Votorantim, and he's also runs Brazil's Open Innovation Group, right? And I think that you said you were nominated for the CASE. What are you nominated for coming up for CASE?
There's the Startup Awards, and there's a list of 10 people nominated for the hero of the Brazilian ecosystem. Hero
of the Brazilian ecosystem. Well, bro, I had one dinner with you, and I've met a ton of people here. You're the fucking hero, okay? What Alex is doing in the market is exactly what Brazil needs, okay? And the challenges that he's faced to do it are immense, and he's done it with zero budget, okay? What we're seeing
just by connecting people.
Yeah, I mean, another round of applause for this guy, because I think if you don't win, you won today. You know, and one of the interesting things, we were talking, we're having hours of conversations, and he's like, Ryan, he goes, you're gonna get up there and you need to tell everyone what they need to hear, right? I'm like, but Alex, you're doing this, you're here, you're doing it. Why aren't people listening? And Flora and Alex looked at me and like, Ryan, we've got a culture of colonization that's still here, right? It's different when someone else gets up there, white guy from America, and says it. It gives it a whole different type of validity. And I want everyone in this room to cut that shit out now. That mindset is wrong. You have the talent and the expertise sitting in this room already. It doesn't take a San Francisco fucking tech bro to get up here to make you understand that this is important. You need to go to the experts here and listen to the experts here, okay? And Alex, the one that I've met, he's one of the top, a cream of the crop. And when it comes to corporate innovation, right, you have the opportunity to be a little bit ahead of the market, because what you're seeing in San Francisco is sort of, the startup scene is fantastic, but it's sort of becoming by the wayside, right? What you're seeing now is corporate innovation. The money's coming from the corporates. The corporates are starting accelerators. They're starting, they're investing. They're becoming a part of the ecosystem. And what Alex has done, he's already coalesced a community of some of the top corporate innovators in the market. And if you start implanting that into startup and innovation in ecosystem, you're ahead of the game. You're where San Francisco is today, right? So what really needs to happen is the corporations and the startups need to actually start working together and figuring out how to help each other expand this market, because that's what's going to keep disruptors from outside of the United States away from taking away some of the pieces of the pie that you own here, right? You need to keep this Brazilian. You need to keep these corporate You know, like giant cement companies, right? They've been doing this for how many years, Alex? You could yell it out. Yeah, a long time, right? And don't see the need to innovate because, well, they own the market. Well, I can tell you, it's not even the US. Cemex, what they're working on, you should be worried. They'll come this direction, okay? So all of these old corporations need to start figuring out how the heck they're going to stay alive in the next century, and it is not by continuing the status quo. So again, Silicon Valley, it's a mindset. It's not a place. And you're already, I've experienced so much of that mindset already here. And it's important to continue expanding on that. You know, Europe send their executives on crazy expensive learning journeys every week to San Francisco to learn about it. The Chinese are building infrastructure, as I said. But you need to realize right now that it's just a state of mind. And Brazil, with its market, incredibly diverse populations, can be one of those leaders, right? Going back to diversity. I was one of the sort of white male leaders in the diversity inclusion movement in San Francisco. Talking about it, one of the first to talk about it is less of a look at your employer pool sort of way and look at it all as white men, talking more about the products that you're able to bring to market because of the diverse minds that you have in the room. Right? A couple examples of where diversity comes in play to make business cases is when automatic sensors in the bathroom sinks first came out, they didn't work for brown people or black people. Why? Because everyone on the engineering side testing it was white, and it was designed to reflect off of white surfaces. So when they were testing it, that works, it works, it works. They released it to the market, it didn't work for a majority of the world's population, they had to make some changes, right? And that wasn't inherent bias, that was totally unconscious because there wasn't any diversity on that team. All right, same thing when it comes to the Apple Health app. When it first came out, version 1 going to cover all the basic needs of all the users. Nothing in there in the menstrual cycle. Hello, 50% of the world's freaking population, because there were no women on the team. Okay? The cultural diversity you have here, I can't stress it enough, is one of the most important strategic assets you have in going to the global market. And you need to capitalize on that. So I'm really excited to be with all of you here today and continue discussing. I don't see where my timer is. I'm not sure how far I am into presentation, if anyone wants to shout that out for me. You know, but we want to talk about, you know, four things today, continue the conversation. Diversity, people, right? When we talk people, we talk about having the right skills, making sure that you're creating pipelines, which we'll hear a little bit about later today. Culture, right? This mindset that you need to implement across the entire ecosystem, from the corporate executives down to the new banks, okay? And also when we're talking about talking process, right? How to actually innovate. What systems do you use? What's the most efficient ways to do it in an environment where corporates view things as a threat, right? These typical initiatives are top-down approaches. How many people are on the corporate side in this room? Big corporates, raise your hand. Okay. So you know the challenges more than anyone of working in these big institutions and trying to get them to change. And that's a top-down approach. Data science, becoming a data science and model-driven organization, that starts with you. That starts with the executives. And that moves its way down the pipeline. And I'm happy to discuss that as well later. So I'm not 6 minutes? Perfect. So back to who you're going to be hearing from today. What I really wanted to do when I was creating sort of the list of people that I wanted to bring here to speak to you, I wanted to bring people that are hyper-relevant to not just the Brazilian market, but to the San Francisco ecosystem, right? You'll hear from Jackie Hyland, who used to run Latin America for Silicon Valley Bank. Silicon Valley Bank banks, what, 88% of the world's venture-backed startups? Something like that? It's crazy, okay? She is one of the experts in that field. You're going to hear from Pedro Sorrentino. Is Pedro here yet? I won't call you. Yeah, he's here. And Pedro is Brazilian, went to San Francisco, started working for SendGrid. SendGrid's a huge billion-dollar organization now, or hundreds of millions rather. And then became a VC, was working at a VC firm, and then decided, and had a couple unicorns, and decided, you know what, I'm going to go out and start my own. I want to help connect the Brazilian startup market and ecosystem to venture capital. And he's one of the leaders in that space. He's absolutely brilliant. Then there's Joey Hinson, who you hear from later today as well. Joey runs all things TechCrunch on the operations side. And Brazil was one of the top markets that he was looking to tackle this year. So I introduced him to Flora, and Flora actually produced the event yesterday and did an amazing job. So you're going to be hearing from some of the biggest thought leaders when it comes to Brazil and Silicon Valley that I've experienced in the entire San Francisco market. So with that, we'll get started on some of the other presentations, and would like to take any sort of questions if you have. My expertise, again, sort of the global innovation ecosystem, but specifically corporates and startups. We'll be on a panel a little bit later. We can discuss more there, but also large-scale digital transformations, right? Because staying relevant in the digital age isn't just about connecting with startups and having the latest technologies. It's about the people. It's about investing in your people, making sure that they have the right skill sets, the right mindsets to really bring your organization's future forward in the future. Any questions? Sorry, did I see? Question top left.
Sorry if you already said that, but when are Galvanize coming to Brazil? I saw in the map that you are already in Asia, Africa, Europe, US, and us.
So I'm right here, bro. Already here. No, good question. There's a reason I'm here as well. It's not just to support this event and help Flora, it's to explore the Brazilian market. And I've been having some very interesting conversations with some of the biggest organizations in the country, and specifically around how do we take the conglomerates in Brazil and future-proof them when it comes to talent around data science, around software engineering. So there are some conversations that I'll actually have another meeting here at noon, which could help us enter the market a lot sooner. And if you have a budget and want to help that journey, you let me know.
Hi, Brian. My name is Luisa. I was wondering, you mentioned that you had like very diverse profiles and backgrounds of people that joined the trainings of Galvanize and that became data scientists and are working as software engineers for IBM. How long are the trainings, and how deep does it go into the tech and all of the content, the technical content?
Yeah, fantastic question. So our data science program is 3 months. It's the first data science boot camp in the country. And then also our web development used to be 6 months, but we just acquired a company called Hack Reactor. And so that we're going to be, our web development course is going to be shortened to 3 months as well, right? And these are, right, our success metric for these programs is job placement. It's not how many students that come through and graduate. It's how many students come in and graduate and get a full-time job within 6 months in a field related to what they study with Galvanize, and it's currently sitting around 96%. It's huge. So what we do is we have curriculum developers who are former hiring managers and former engineers at some of the biggest companies in the world, work diligently with our hiring partners and in academia as well to find out what corporates need from a data scientist day one, month 6, and we reverse engineer that process to create what's in our curriculum. And so we have the most up-to-date advanced curriculum that's being updated every 2 weeks. It is highly technical. We focus really on what you actually need to know to get the job done and the practicality of it. It's project-based, it's not just theory, it's hardcore technical training. It's one of the most advanced in the market. And we also have a 1-year accredited master's degree as well. And we graduated, I think, over 6,000 students through these programs. Other question? We've got 58 seconds. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Danny. Do you think, like, facing all diversity you have here in Brazil, we are able to take the eyes of all the world once your politics or your economic stuff is going better? Or do you think you are not ready for that yet? Like, you think all the world is looking for something else, for some, like, best opportunities? This is the time I think, like, it's taking longer and, like, than expectations, yes.
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Do you think here, right now, in our big picture, can you bring more investments from outside, or it's taking longer since your, like, politics, economic is something to see in, like, short or longer periods here?
So from what I understand, you currently are seeing a return to the market for, from VCs, right? You know, Redpoint Ventures, et cetera. After the collapse, most of them fled and viewed Brazil as sort of a no man's land, but that's starting to change. You certainly have challenges here in terms of high interest rates and corruption that are barriers to entry for those markets, which is why I think corporate venture arms need to take a bigger role in supporting the ecosystem. This Alex will be talking about that on a panel a little bit later today. But I think this question is probably best for when Pedro gets up and speaks as a VC, as someone who's come into the Brazilian market over the last few years. He's really the expert on that. So it says 1:14, but I think we're done with my part of the presentation. So again, thanks for everyone for being here today. It's super, super important to understand that the ecosystem needs to continue to be developed here, right? And it's people like Alex, like the Open Innovation Group, and the large corporate players within that I really think are the future. And more importantly, connect with the people that will be speaking here today, because they are some of the experts in the local, in terms of the local ecosystem and market. So thanks so much, and happy to have a conversation with anyone a little bit later if you have more questions.